1 Kings, going to Old Testament. 1 Kings chapter 17, verse 7. If you're not taking notes, start taking notes. Sometime later, the brook dried up. Everybody say it, dried up. Because there had been no rain in the land, and the word of the Lord came to him. This is Elijah. Go to Zarephath in the region of Sidon and stay there. Sometimes God has to allow where you are to dry up in order to move you somewhere else, because as long as you have some resource or some substance or some sustenance where you are, you won't move. You ever had God had to kick you out of somewhere? It's not fun. Hey, it's not fun. Just listen to him. He'll tell you when it's time to move. Don't make him move you. Oh, you're dismissed. That's all some of y'all needed. He said, I've directed a widow. Everybody say a widow. I love this phrase right here. Listen, the Bible always says what it means. It means what it says, and it usually means or says something a little deeper. And I want you to listen to this phrase. Now, and then we'll exegete it just a little bit. I've directed a widow there to supply you with food. Now, this is the prophet of God, and if you understood what it even meant to be a widow in those days, it meant you pretty much got nothing. You need to be taken care of. Somebody's gonna have to take care of you. It meant, how could a widow ever take care of anybody else? I love how God will use the people that we've already written off to do something amazing in his kingdom. Hey, be careful who you write off, because it might be who God is choosing to actually bless and sustain you. Be careful how you treat people. I'm not even preaching right now, but I'm trying to help you. I've directed a widow there to supply you with food. Have you ever felt like you were forgotten, like you were the last one picked? David was the last one picked. His dad overlooked him and picked all of his brothers before him. He said, if there's anybody that should be out in the field watching sheep, it ought to be David. And the prophet said, do you have another son? Aren't you glad that God doesn't just look at what you are capable of in the eyes of people? What I'm trying to get you to understand is you've been writing yourself out of a plan that God's been writing you into the whole time. But a lot of it will depend on your willingness to do what he's called you to do, and to follow his will, and to follow his plan, and to follow his word. I have directed a widow there to supply you with food. Now I want you to remember this, because she doesn't know anything about the direction. Some of us just wish God would actually direct us. But he's gonna speak to her later through the prophet. God didn't talk directly to her. So he went to Zarephath. And when he came to the town gate, a widow was there gathering sticks. She was already there, she was working. Now she's getting ready to tell us that she doesn't have anything, but she's still working. What if she had to have been where she was working with what she had? God can't use you if you won't work with what you've got. But she's working with what she has right now. And he called to her. Now listen, if you're strong into equality and treating people right and justice, this is fixing to go all over you. So just buckle your seatbelt. Don't get mad at me. I'm just reading the Bible, okay? He called to her and said, hey, would you bring me a little water in a jar so I may have a drink? And as she was going to get it, I love that. She didn't even answer him. She just went. He said, hey, and bring me please a piece of bread. You ever had somebody do that to you? Hey, can you get me some water? And as you get up to get the water, somebody else is like, hey, can you get the ketchup? Hey, I need a fork. Hey, can you bring some napkins? Just bring all the paper towels. And you're over there just, This is what happens. And she says, verse 12, as surely as the Lord your God lives, I don't have any bread. Only a handful of flour in a jar. Ooh, this fires me up. And a little olive oil in a jar. I don't have anything. I don't have any bread. I only have the stuff to make bread. And I'm gathering a few sticks to take home and make a meal for myself and my son that we may eat it and die. Can you be a little more positive? I'm positive we're gonna eat it and die. And Elijah said to her, notice what he says. It's so hilarious to me. He says, don't be afraid. Go home and do as you have said. I wrote it in my margins, eat and die, question mark, question mark, question mark. Yeah, go on and eat it and die. That's fine. But first, everybody say, but first. God always has a but first. But first, make a small loaf. Now listen, if justice is your thing, quality is your thing, this is gonna make you mad. Because sometimes a word from God will frustrate you. But first make a small loaf of bread for me, from what you have. Not from what God's getting ready to give you, from what you already have. Because how can God give you more if you won't use what you already have for his kingdom and for his glory? And bring it to me and then make something for you and your son. Let's just pause for a minute. Can you imagine if I came to your house? Pastor comes for a visit. And I said, hey, how y'all doing? You said, we're doing bad. It's bad. We don't have any food. It's so bad, we're fixing to eat the Hawaiian bread that we have in the pantry. If you don't know Hawaiian bread, stuff's got crack in it. We're gonna eat the Hawaiian bread, and then we're gonna die. How many loaves do you have? Let me see, there's 1, 2, 3 of us. We got 3. Cool. I'm hungry. Y'all bring them to me and let me eat, and then y'all eat. You wouldn't like me very much, would you? You'd be like, hey, we just changed churches. God bless you. This is essentially what's happening. It's heavy. It's a heavy request. Notice, he doesn't say, hey, listen, eat first, and then if you have something left over, feed me. Why? Because that takes no faith. None whatsoever. For this is what the word of the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Notice, the instructions come first. Because obedience is always understood on the backside, hardly ever on the front end. Let the word of God, the God of Israel says this: the jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord sends rain on the land. She went away. I love how she immediately responded. She went away and did as Elijah had told her. Not as she heard directly from God, she heard through somebody else a word from God. Because how many of you know God can speak from somebody else, through somebody else to you? So there was food for every day for Elijah, notice the order, and for the woman and for her family, for the jar of flour was not used up and the jug of oil did not run dry, in keeping with the word of the Lord spoken by Elijah. Somebody say, that's heavy. Turn to your neighbor and say, that's heavy. It's heavy. It was a heavy word. Hey, feed me first. What? That's a heavy word. You ever carried something heavy? This happened to me a couple of weeks ago. We went on a family trip, and it was me and Jennifer and Carla and Jesse, and we were all in the airport, and the flight got delayed like an hour and a half, and we were just waiting in the airport, and then we were getting ready to board the plane. And Carla, you remember this? I was like, Carla had her backpack there, and I was like, I'm gonna carry her backpack. And when I reached for her backpack, I didn't realize she had 3 toddlers in this thing. Like there was just boulders in there. Like it was so bad that I went like this. And then I was like, oh nope, I got to use the legs on this one. And so I picked it up and I set it on a table there, and then I put my arm in and I put my other arm in, and then I was like, "Hit." And I looked at her, I said, how are you carrying this? She was like, oh, that's my books, because she's in a Master's of Divinity program, and she's studying, and she's learning, and she's growing, and she's going to the next level, and I'm not used to carrying those books, but she is. And I told her, that's too heavy. You need to lighten up. You don't need to carry so much. And you got to be careful who you listen to, because sometimes they will try to unload a weight off of you that God has actually put on you that's growing you. Now, I'm not talking about the weight of fear and doubt and depression and anxiety, because some of us are carrying a weight that God never gave us. We're just persevering without progressing because we don't know which weight to carry and which weight to give to Him. Make sure you're carrying the right weight, because when you're carrying the right weight, there's a blessing in the weight.